the part that we call I am. So the mental represents the middle circle and the intellectual. This is the part of the mind that is in charge. Whenever we are out of balance with too much spiritual or too much emotional, we can get back into balance using the intellectual part of ourselves, or the part that we call I am. Another way we can see these three circles is if we use the top circle as a positive 10, the bottom circle as a negative 20, the addition and the subtraction figures out in the middle. So if we are a negative 20, that means we're too emotional or too instinctual. And the instinctual self is a part of us that seeks to survive, like the eating, when we our drive, our survival instincts to eat, to have sex, and all those survival instincts. So if we're pulling a negative 20 on the bottom, or the emotional self, it figures out that if this is positive 10, we have our spiritual lives at a positive 10, but our emotional or instinctual lives at a negative 20. Our current lives, or the I am, would be figured out as a negative 10. So that's how the psyche is understood on an intellectual level. And if you think about it, it really makes sense. And this is how you can approach truth objectively. And you can also approach your fears objectively. The reason why we have fear of truth is because we're pulling more towards the instinctual self than the spiritual self. Okay. So let's go ahead and read this portion of phase 8, which is the phase that we're in right now, which is Sapphira number 3, Bina. The balancing of the opposites of the spiritual and the emotional, or the future and the past, is the effects of the mental, or in other words, what is being done in the present. The object or goal of the balancing of the opposites is to feel instead of think. Or to put it in another way, it is to think in images instead of words. The purpose of the mental or intellectual self, therefore, is to understand these feelings and images and to know when and how to communicate and teach it. For nothing is truly real unless it can be communicated to and understood by the whole, or in other words, by the critical mass. Okay, and let me explain a little bit about this critical mass. This house was real, is real, because the electricians understood how to build it, the construction workers understood how to build it, the plumbers understood how to build it, each one having their own job in making this house a reality. If any of these parts were left out, this house wouldn't be lived in. It may be lived in, but it's really not real because you're not really comfortable in it. So in other words, reality is when you can, is when all things are taken care of. Nothing is left out. So the critical mass, in order, those who built this house, was the critical mass necessary in order to make this house real. And the same goes for anything else. If you want to create a society, for example, of peace, you have to communicate the information of peace to the critical mass, the amount of people necessary to make this peace a reality. Otherwise, peace will not be real. And in another way of seeing it, would not be realized. Will not be realized. So in order to make anything realized, a reality, we have to not only know what we're talking about, but we have to be able to communicate what we're talking about and help other people to understand it. And so it is my hope that my presentation to you, the listener, will be not difficult, with me not so difficult, and you will be able to understand the things I'm saying. I'm hoping that this is the case. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible to understand, and if I succeed, then I am that much closer to helping the world realize how to create. And this is how we can become joint creators with God on all levels. God, with a capital G, as far as I'm concerned, is the whole universe, the seen and the unseen universe. But on a smaller G, the lower scale, we're talking about this world, in other words, or we can also use the big G, but on a massive scale. So in other words, if we're trying to bring peace upon the earth, we would pray to God to help us do this, and then we would communicate words of knowledge and wisdom to those of our listeners. So let me go ahead and finish the rest of this and complete phase 8. To be totally aware without thinking at all is the most ideal and balanced state. Perfection in stillness. Consequently, living becomes second nature. Or in other words, play instead of work, fun instead of drudgery. You are guided by love instead of rules. Okay, so first, however, in order to do anything, we need guidelines or rules. But once we understand the guidelines or the rules, then, and it becomes second nature to us, then we can apply those things that we have been taught. And that's the goal of these phases, is to first help each individual on an individual level to understand what is being communicated here, and then once you understand it, then you can incorporate it in your everyday life. Now, mind you, the phases is leading up to the 4-year program, and the 4-year program is the most important part of this presentation. It understands it helps each individual understand how to incorporate the phases in their lives